passively worshiping the Lord in our private bedrooms. Maybe that is the case in Egypt because we didn't have the opportunity or the circumstances. But we ought to be a living gospel. Now, how many gospels do we have? Wrong. 5 gospels. We have Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and the Christian. And many will never get a chance to read the first 4. You will be the only gospel that people will come in contact with. I had an opportunity to meet someone who asked me about God for 15 minutes or so or for 2 hours on an airplane flight. Well, maybe that is the only chance he will get to hear about God. Maybe God put me in this situation so that I can be a reason or a cause, not for me, but through me, the Holy Spirit may work in him and with him. You see what I'm saying? So, have you seen the movie? I forget the movie, what it's called, but I think there's an expression called seizing the moment, or seize the moment. I forget the movie. Seize the moment. Capture that moment with all your heart, mind, and will. Whenever you have the opportunity to actually speak about the Lord whom you love so much, take advantage of this opportunity. Okay. As Christians, we need to respond to 2 things. To the growing influence of our culture on our Christian faith, as we discussed. We also need to respond to the decreasing influence of our Christian faith on our culture. Do you see how we need to balance things out? We need to respond to the growing or increasing influence of our culture on our faith, and the decreasing influence of our faith on our culture. We have to maintain that equilibrium. Here's one of my favorite verses in Colossians 2:6-8. As you have therefore received Christ Jesus, this is a commandment for us. So walk in him, rooted and built up in him and established in the faith as you have been taught, abounding in it with thanksgiving. Beware lest anyone cheat you through philosophy and empty deceit, according to the tradition of men, according to the basic principles of the world, and not according to Christ. So in these 2 verses, there are 2 things. There's a commandment and there's a what? A warning, exactly. Be rooted, be built up, be established, beware. Do you see? You see these 2? There's the commandment and there's a warning. And that's what St. Paul said in Colossians. خلوا بالكم, yet be anchored in the faith. Now let's go back to apologetic topics, and then we'll delve into just the first one. What are those topics that we need to learn more about? What are this is the curriculum, by the way, that I serve in the seminaries. So with the grace of God, I teach in the seminary of St. Athanasius Theological Seminary in Corpus Christi, in the monastery in Texas with Amba Yusuf, and also with Amba Mina in Mississauga in Canada. These are the subjects of the seminary in the course of apologetics. So if you want to learn more about these subjects, I'm not saying you have to be the expert or extremely proficient, but at least you have to have some basic knowledge of these 10 subjects as apologetics for you to be able to have, to be the light and the salt in this day and age. And if you can't, someone asked me during break, if you don't have the gift of speaking, preaching, whatever, you can still share the gospel through your through your life, your works, your actions. I think it was St. Francis of Assisi who said, preach at all times, and if necessary, use words. Preach at all times, and if necessary, use words. Do you know also a story? You know Amba Pachomius, one of our great saints in our church, Amba Pachomius Abba Sharika, St. Pachomius. You know how he became San Pachomius? You know, some people actually, he was in a village he was not Christian. He was in a village that filled with Christians, and they actually, they were supposed to beat him up and persecute him and kill him, but they gave him food, water, and rest and shelter, and they tended to him, and he told them, "Why are you being so nice to me?" They said, "Well, because our Bible and our God," and so on. And they talked to him about the Lord Jesus Christ. He became Al-Anba Bachomis. So don't underestimate the power of your lives. I one time tweeted this tweet. I said, there are two reasons why people do not accept the Lord Jesus Christ. There are two reasons. One, they have never met a Christian. Two, they have met a Christian. I'll leave it at that. Let's be the first, not the second. All right. Apologetic topics. The existence of God. Does God exist? Does he not exist? Outside the scriptures. خلوا الكتاب المقدس دلوقتي على جنب مع احترامي الشديد طبعا. How can we have evidence for the existence of God? This is what we will discuss in the next talk, God willing. Outside the scriptures, using logic, reason, science, and all of that. Number two, the authenticity of the scriptures. Is the Bible true? Is it divinely inspired? Or as Dan Brown said in his book, The Da Vinci Code, which I'm sure you've heard of, oh, this Bible is just a collection of books that some peasants in the 4th century put together. Is it just some collection of history books, or is it divinely inspired? Is it the Word of God? How can we prove the authenticity of the scriptures without using the scriptures? The distinctiveness of Christianity is a big one. What is so unique about Christ? Why am I a Christian? This is the last talk tomorrow, I believe, Abu Naib. مش كده؟ يوم الأحد. I think it is tomorrow. I think in the schedule it is tomorrow. Why am I a Christian? What is so special about Christ and Christianity that makes me a Christian? If your college roommate comes and asks you this question, hey, I see that you pray or read the Agbiya or whatever. Why are you a Christian? Why aren't you a Muslim or a Buddhist or a Hindu or a Confucianist? So we need to respond to that. The evolution theory, that's a big one. That needs a 2-week-long conference. Do we believe in evolution? Do we not? What about intelligent design? What about the Big Bang Theory? What are all of these things? Morality and ethics. I love this one because it's philosophical and I love philosophy. Morality and ethics. Where do morals come from? Where do moral values come from? Is it from evolution? Is it from society? Is it from culture? Human reason? Science and faith. Big one. Is there contradiction between العلم والإيمان? حد فاكر مصطفى محمود? Anyways, is there a contradiction between science and faith? Or do they complement? Okay, do they contradict or complement? Also, faith and reason. Faith and reason. Here's another one. The resurrection of Christ. Is it an event that took place in history? Well, a legend, أسطورة. The problem of evil and suffering. This is the conference I had with with the Reverend Abuna Dawood in Egypt. It was all on this one subject. 5 days, 21 lectures on one subject. The problem in Egypt, but it was very relevant because of the events that were taking place. I think it was after a few church bombings and so on and so forth. So this was a big question, the problem of evil and suffering. And here is how the question is posed. If God is so powerful, he can get rid of evil. If he's very powerful, omnipotent, all-powerful, he can get rid of evil. That's premise number one. Premise number two. If God is so loving, he would want to get rid of evil. Third premise. Evil exists. Conclusion. Therefore, God is not all-powerful. God is not all-loving. God doesn't exist. حلوا لي بقى المشكلة المعضلة دي. Okay? Yes, sir. لا, let's not discuss it now. أنا بقول يعني ليها حل طبعا بس.
I just wanted to say God is fear, so whenever God exists, it's not fair to only have everything is.
True. Yes. Yes. Yeah. And a lot of other things as well. طبعا we can respond to this philosophy. It's called syllogism or yani premises and all of that. How can you respond to this with logic and reason? Of course you can. And you can refute that. But that's what atheists use. And for someone who is ill-equipped, هيقول, oh, wait a minute. This actually makes a lot of sense. Maybe God doesn't exist after all because he has all this evil in this world and he can't really do anything about it, and he doesn't really love us if he allows all these innocent children to die. فاهم قصدي? Because it's an existential problem. Yet the syllogism is posed as an intellectual problem. فعارف? You're speaking different languages. So if it's an intellectual problem, let's discuss it intellectually. If it's an existential, عارفين existential? يعني my nephew died of cancer. هتيجي بقى تقول له well free will. لا دي حاجة emotional, not intellectual. فاهم قصدي? So that's the two sides of the problem of evil. Yes.
Actually, that's one of the biggest things I hear from Christians or non-Christians or believers that were believers is
this problem of evil.
Yeah, why? I mean, I was even in Egypt recently, and I had a discussion with some people from Europe, and they're like, how, they asked me, "Are you Christian?" And I said, yes. Are you Coptic? Yeah. And they said, yes. And they said, how can you believe in God when there's people shooting and this and that?
Yeah.
And my answer, I froze for a minute, and then I said something, and I said, well, I know that Christ is my King, and He's my God, and He has all the answers. It's hard to answer in a two-sentence question.
Right. It is, but
that takes like hours.
But there are answers.
There are.
And 30-second answers even. Maybe next year we can have a conference on the problem of evil and suffering. How is that? I'm going to invite myself over to you guys. Okay. Next, religious pluralism. كل الأديان بتعبد نفس الإله. Like we said, how can we say that not all religions worship the same God? Lastly, truth. Does truth exist? This is a philosophical subject. الحق المطلق. Absolute truth. So these are the subjects of apologetics. We, as Christians, as believers, must have some ideas or actually be able to engage intellectually. And we don't have to be trained intellectuals and philosophers. Absolutely not. But we have to have some knowledge, background on these subjects so that we can speak the language of the culture we live in.
So you said if you'd like to read more, so what is the source?
Yeah, well, I don't want to be, I'm not here to market the book, but I have put most of these, if not all, in the book. This may be a good time to discuss with you the book. It's called Timeless Truth in Truthless Times. Timeless Truth in Truthless Times. Answers to tough questions about God, Christianity, and the Bible. And the book is basically questions and answers. It's not, you don't have to read from Gilda to get from the book, from cover to cover, thank you, from cover to cover. It's questions and answers. So, questions like who created God? Why does God seem so violent in the Old Testament? Big question. Is it wrong to doubt my faith? Here's another big question. Why did God create people knowing they will end up in hell? يعني هو غبي وجع طب ما كان الخير يخلق الناس اللي هيروح السما بس. Can I live a good moral life without God? So questions that are like that from a philosophical bent, I put them all in this book. It's called Timeless Truth and Truthless Times. And I think Mark, right? You have so instead of I wish I brought with me more copies, but Mark is going to take a tally of whoever wants to order a copy, and then we can get like a box or so from the bookstore, the church, and he sells this book for the church. Anyways, so that's one reference, and it's forwarded by Amba Yusuf, here with the forward, my father of confession, and Abuna Dawud Lamai. So they both wrote the forward of the book. So it's an Orthodox perspective book. Usually you get Mere Christianity from C.S. Lewis or The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel or More Than a Carpenter by Josh McDowell. They're great books. I love them all. But I wanted to add some Orthodox flavor. That's why I intentionally added a question here called, do I have to go to church to have a relationship with God? That's one question that makes this book uniquely Orthodox. And I did talk about the Eucharist and the liturgy and all that. Anyways, other books that I recommend for you. Mere Christianity. It's a must-have. Actually, let me back up. One book must-have before Mere Christianity, On the Incarnation by Saint Athanasius. تجسد الكلمة. It's a theological book. Huh?
It's like my favorite book.
It is. Actually, I remember one sermon, His Holiness Pope Shenouda said every Christian should read this book at least once. On the Incarnation is a theology book, but defending the faith. A prerequisite for defending the faith is to be anchored in Orthodox theology. Okay, Mere Christianity, The Case for Christ. Actually, all the series of Lee Strobel, The Case for Faith, The Case for Christ. You seem like you're familiar with all of them. Case for Creator, Case for Miracles. Just he released it just recently. Josh McDowell, he wrote a book called Evidence That Demand a Verdict. More Than a Carpenter. Also, one of my very, I love this author. His name is Timothy Keller. Any of you ever heard of Timothy Keller? Tim Keller. He wrote a book called The Reason for God. All these are great books, but I want you to read them with discernment. فاهمين قصدي؟ يعني بتمييز. لأن they don't talk about doctrine or dogma or orthodoxy or Protestantism. They don't mention that, but just be discerning when you read these books. They're excellent books. Did that answer your question, Abuna? Did that answer? Okay. All right.
I was just saying that On the Incarnation, that one is Orthodox.
Oh, that's where we get our theology from, St. Athanasius. Yes, and St. Cyril of Alexandria. One was number 20, the other was number 24. Both of them are the pillars of our faith. Number 20 patriarch, I mean to say. All right.
I'm sorry, can I interject?
Please.
Can you perhaps give that list to any one of us, and we can maybe post it on our website, or
Sure. I can give that list to who?
you can give it to me.
I can give it to you. Miriam. Okay, so let's share contact information. All right, so let's shift gears. ايه رأيكم انتوا اما يعني تعبتوا ولا are we good to go? You good to go? Okay, ماشي. So we'll shift gears. احنا اتكلمنا عن كل الحاجات دي. Let's now talk about the I have it right here. The existence of God. And have you help me with this one? Does God? No, not this one. Does God exist? Colorado.
There's also another one, 12 Ordinary Men.
12 Ordinary Men is a classic. Yes, good one. Add that. I mean, we can add that to the list as well. Okay, is there a God? Yes, there is. Okay, done. Finished. We're done. Now, this is the question of all questions. This is the question that every human being must be able to respond to and address and answer. Is there a God? What do atheists say? There's no God. Theos, no God. What do theists say? There is a God. What do agnostics say? Max, I love that, because that's exactly what agnostics are. I don't know if there is a God. What do skeptics say? And I doubt, the key word is doubt. I doubt there is a God. All right. Which one is right? They cannot all be right. Very good. Good answer. Let's examine what? What's the key word I'm looking for? Let's examine. What's the key word? Help me. Let's examine. Yes, that's the word I'm looking for. The evidence. What's your name? Amira. Beautiful. Let's examine the evidence. Al-adilla. Why is this word very important? Because if you say, let me ask you why this word is important. Can you prove, here's a big word, that God exists? Prove. Okay, let's implied or implicitly speaking, I am saying scientific method in that word prove. فاهم قصدي? Can I prove scientifically that God exists? Now that I added the word scientifically. Absolutely not. Because science deals with matter and energy. God is neither matter nor energy. God is not something you can put in a test tube. Okay? He's immaterial, metaphysical. So you can't prove that he exists, or else do we need faith? Faith for what? I can prove that God exists. And that's not what we're in the business of doing, proving the existence of God. No, you can't. But you can have what? Evidence. Ample evidence for the existence of God. Imagine any of you in the legal field? Lawyer, paralegal? Okay. When you are a prosecutor, or let's say you're a prosecutor and there's a defendant and a criminal, and can you, if you are a prosecutor and you can prove that this criminal committed the crime, do we need a trial? No, absolutely not. You proved that he committed the crime. The trial is more like the formality. But what does the prosecutor do? He tries to give, or she tries to give, evidence beyond a shadow of a doubt or reasonable doubt. And if you have all this evidence, then the probability of this person being the criminal is very, very, very high. فاهمين قصدي? So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to give evidence for the existence of God where no other explanation exists. If the description fits perfectly this criminal, not only that, forgive me to make this analogy, but if this person confessed that he actually committed that crime, wouldn't that be evidence as well? Okay, and that's what we're going to use in this case. Forgive me to make this analogy between God and criminal, but that's the any. Okay, number one question. Yes, sir, Max.
Two
Yes.
questions. One,
Not the number one question, though, so.
I got you. Go for it.
in that what you're saying, the evidence. So there's this concept of cops and prosecutors that you're supposed to get the data and then try to find out who did it from that data.
Exactly.
As opposed to you have a suspect and you're trying to find evidence to make that suspect guilty.
Both. We're going to use both methodologies for the existence of God.
But what I'm saying is, so from what we're doing, from your job, you have something that you're trying to prove, so you're finding evidence towards that.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Nope. That's called presupposition.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. I don't do presuppositionalism. It's a field. I presuppose that the Bible is true. I presuppose that God exists, and I'm going to try to find evidence to point to him. That's circular reasoning, circular references. If you use Excel and you do circular references, that's not good philosophy.
Yeah.
Some do. I don't.
Okay. And the other thing is, what is our definition of God?
Excellent.
What does that even mean?
يعني you're paving the way. This is a great segue for this. I love it. Now let me just, because the word evidence is very dear to me. Oh, I'm only responding because my wife asked. Here's the book of Acts. The book of Acts, chapter 1, I believe. I go back to the scriptures. Everything is in the scriptures. What does the book of Acts say, chapter 1? Okay. It says, yes, verse 3. The former account I made, O Theophilus, of all that Jesus began both to do and teach until the day in which he was taken up, and after he, through the Holy Spirit, had given commandments to the apostles whom he had chosen, to whom, listen to this, he also presented himself alive after suffering by many infallible proofs and evidence. Actually, in another translation, it's evidence. Here I have the New King James proofs. But other translations, if you actually look at the Greek, it's more evidence than proofs. Many infallible. ببراهين وأدلة كثيرة بالعربي. براهين وأدلة. So evidence is not something that Christians should frown upon or just have faith. Yeah, we have to have faith, yeah. But faith and evidence go hand in hand. When Thomas told the Lord Jesus after the resurrection, he said, unless I see your hands and put my fingers in the wounds, I'm not going to believe. Did Jesus say, you just have faith? He didn't say that. He showed him the evidence, and yet he said, "Well, blessed are those who see and not and believe and not yet seen." But was he frowning upon Thomas to show him evidence? Of course not. And if you read John chapter 5, Christ said many times, "If you don't believe me because of the works that I do, the evidence that I have in front of you." So evidence is not a bad word for Christians. Okay, I'm saying that because some think it is. Number one question. Where did the universe come from? And let me tell you, my friends, on several college campuses, I've spoken to so many atheists over the past decade and more, and very intellectual ones, some very learned atheists. And I asked them this question. Bosso, let's not get into debates. I don't like to do debates. Everything has to be done with love and respect and wisdom and all of that, and gentleness. Answer this first question. Where did the universe come from? There's not one single possible logical answer to this question. Even the biggest atheist who exists nowadays, I mentioned his name earlier. What's his name? Richard Dawkins. He was asked this question. He was put on the spot. You can look it up on YouTube by someone by the name of Frank Turek, who's a dear friend of mine. He's an apologist. The Frank Turek was actually showing this video. When Richard Dawkins, بقلالة قدره, you know what that means? He was asked this question, where did the universe come from? He said, we don't know yet. Mr. Dawkins, come on. You're a scientist. He's not a philosopher. He's a biologist out of Oxford University. Where did the universe come from? Again, he paused and said, I know where it came from. Really? Good. Where did it come from? Aliens came to create the universe and disappeared. That is proof. Once you give an answer like that, then you just pause. Let the answer do the the damage. مش عاوز اقول show the stupidity. Okay. Okay, no, it's okay. But you see what I'm saying? And this is aliens. But why is that? No one had come up with this, I know where the universe came from. I'll show you some explanations. Okay, and I have a lot of stories I want to share with you. But anyways, where did the universe come from? Here are 4 possible explanations. ماشي؟ ناخدهم كده by process of elimination. Imagine you're taking a multiple choice test. And if you don't know the answer, you go to the process. I don't think it's this. It must be that, because it's not the first 3. Let's do the same thing. 4 possible explanations. خليكم معايا. Number 1, the universe came from nothing. Nothing. أنا بقول explanations that people are claiming. دي مش حاجات من عندي يعني. Some people claim the universe came from nothing. Secondly, the universe is self-created. In other words, خلق نفسه بنفسه. Third explanation, it's eternal. The universe has always existed. The 4th possibility, it's created. احنا مش بنقول created by God. Just 4 explanations. Let's look at each one of these. واحدة واحدة ونشوف. معايا? Number 1, the universe came from nothing. Who actually wrote a book? Any of you know Lawrence Krauss? Heard the name? Very, very big atheist. He's a very good friend with Richard Dawkins. They're always together in Oxford, but he's from Arizona State. He's a quantum, you can look him up, Lawrence Krauss. He wrote a very, very nice, well, he thinks it's nice, a big book called A Universe from Nothing. He was actually hosted, do you know Stephen Colbert? The night show host. He actually hosted Lawrence Krauss to discuss this book. And he's a quantum mechanics physicist. I'm not a scientist, so I have no idea what that means. But he wrote this book and he said the universe came from nothing because quantum energy, مش عارف ايه, قاعد بقى الحاجات أنا ما فهمهاش. And he said the universe came from nothing. All the atheistic communities latched onto this book and they said, now we have an explanation where the universe came from. Thank you, Mr. Krauss, for finally giving us an answer to this long-standing question as to where the universe came from. But upon further studies, another quantum mechanics atheist, برضو اسمه David Albert, he wrote an article in the New York Times debunking what Lawrence Krauss said. You know why? Lawrence Krauss committed a philosophical mistake called a category mistake. عارفين يعني إيه؟ When you use the word in a different category, the nothing that Lawrence Krauss was referring to was actually something. فاهمين قصدي? I'll give you an example. Any of you has a PhD? Let's say Mark, you have a PhD. دي نبوة, by the way. Anyways, so Mark has a PhD in engineering. بنسميه إيه? Dr. Mark. Dr. Mark, can you write me a prescription because I have a headache? You're a doctor, aren't you? Yeah. But not that kind of doctor. فاهمين قصدي? Do you see what I'm saying? What did I commit? An equivocation fallacy or category fallacy. It's also called equivocation fallacy. I'm equivocating one word with another word. The nothing that Lawrence Krauss meant was actually something, not the nothing we know as nothing. فاهمين قصدي? Anyways, so did the universe come from nothing? Also intuitively, commonsensically, it doesn't make sense. فاهمين قصدي?
What was the something that he was referring to?
Yeah. Since you asked.
Sorry, I could look it up later.
Yeah, let's do that because I don't want to waste your time.
Yeah, it's fine.
I have everything in the book. It's in the book.
Okay.
All right. I'm not a quantum mechanics scientist, but I like common sense. I do philosophy, and that's my background. So I looked at this and I said, listen, what does the word nothing mean? No thing. So how can a thing come from a no thing? Just simple intuition. What does nothing mean? Nothing means no thing. لا شيء. How can شيء يجي من لا شيء? فاهمين قصدي? It's a contradiction of concept. It's a logical impossibility. So the universe did not come from nothing. طيب. Second possibility. It created himself. The easy to discuss. Did the universe create? Some people believe that the universe created itself. Bertrand Russell, I think, and others, philosophers. Tell me, yes or no? And if no, why not?
Are you referring to the Big Bang?
لا. The Big Bang doesn't mean that it created itself. Huh?
If it didn't exist, it couldn't have created.
Exactly. Now you're on the right track, Max. So, for the universe, think logically. For the universe to create itself, it must first be. Be. In other words, it must exist prior to itself. In other words, it must exist and not exist in the same time. فهمت قصدي? For the universe to create itself, it must exist prior to itself for it to create itself. How can it create itself if it didn't exist to begin with? There's a logical impossibility. Logically, it doesn't make sense. Are we flexing some intellectual muscles? Okay. Third possibility.
So the Big Bang Theory thing that people...
But that's not what the self-created means. The Big Bang implies or says that there was a singularity, if you want to use the technical terms, and I don't want to use all the, and exploded into the universe as we know it now. But even the Big Bang requires, right. I said that once and people laughed at me. I said, the Big Bang requires a Big Banger. In other words, someone who banged the Big Bang. Okay, Danny, move on.
The theory of the Big Bang was actually initially made from.
Listen to Miriam, please.
By a German monk. It doesn't contradict our Christianity, and actually within the Bible you can see evidence of the Big Bang itself. So there's no contradiction there.
Very good, but there's a fine line.
Yeah.
Because those who advocate for the Big Bang, they use it as a substitute creator.
Yeah.
Just like evolution. I have no problem with evolution, but those who use evolution as a substitute
Yeah.
creator, then
They make it so that it's either one or the other.
exactly.
They
It's a
put
both
together.
and, not either or. Very well said. Very well said. So, self-created قلنا لا. طيب بصوا بقى ايه Francis Collins. Yes, sir.
Well, I was going to comment on the Big Bang, but we can see what this says.
Okay. Maybe this will answer your question. Forgive me, and I'm covering you guys. The Language of God, a book by Francis Collins, is a very let's look at his credentials. He's a geneticist. He discovered the genes, disease genes, مش عارف إيه. He's named by former President Obama as the director of the National Institute of Health. Anyways, he knows what he's doing as far as cosmology and genes and all of these things. He said the Big Bang cries out of a divine explanation. It forces us. Can you read it, please? Can someone read it for me? Because I can't. Can you read it, Miriam, please? If you can.
The Big Bang cries out for a divine explanation. It forces us to the conclusion that nature had a definite beginning. I cannot see how nature could have created itself. Only a supernatural force that is outside of space and time could have done that.
Excellent. And because of his science, he became a Christian. Because of his genuine scientific studies, seeking the truth. Max.
So I wanted to comment that the Big Bang, everybody likes to bring up the Big Bang. It doesn't comment on where everything came from. Well, the question that you're commenting on.
Yes.
So the Big Bang, the theory behind it, just in case you guys don't know,
Yes.
is that singularity, whatever that singularity was, contained all the matter, energy, heat, gravity,
Space and time.
space-time of our universe. It was all in a single point, and then that point expanded, and that's what created the planets and blah, 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 blah. But the question that George is posing is, then where did that singularity come from?
Exactly. Exactly.
So a lot of people like to use the Big Bang as an answer, but it's not actually an answer to it. It's where this stuff came from, but it's not where the universe came from.
Exactly.
Just so that you guys understand what. So what Mariam was saying, that, like, the argument to that is that, like, the Big Bang was a huge explosion of tons of energy, all the energy that we know in the universe. And if you think about God speaking, it was probably a very powerful moment. So that could have been supported by the Big Bang theory.
Excellent.
Just so you guys
Well said. Well said. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, just like the Big Bang explains the big, not the bang. It was big, but we don't know how did that come about. And also, let me mention to you, now we talk about Darwin, The Origin of Species. If you read the book, Darwin and Herbert Spencer and all of his followers, and I've read their books, they never once discussed the origin of species, even though the title of his book is The Origin of Species. And here's how I summarize what Darwin did. Darwin discussed the survival of species, not the arrival of species. Because when he was asked, well, we're talking about evolution and survival of the fittest and this and this and that, but where did it all come from? He was mute. He said, I don't know. That's beyond my scope of studies. And if you study Darwin himself, he didn't talk about the origin of species. So no one gave me a logical answer to where the universe came from. Here is the most commonly used explanation up until the last maybe 50 years. The universe has always existed. It's eternal. True or false? Because
if philosophically speaking, if you're talking about a thing is a material object. So if you're looking back in time, so something has to beget something. So if you're going all the way back, this thing had to beget this thing had to beget this thing had to beget this thing.
excellent point.
So if you're going all the way back, eventually you have to come to a stopping point.
Exactly.
If you're talking about something that is material.
And we call that in philosophy infinite regression. And you'll find yourself going to infinite regression, which you lose the cause of all these effects. Very well said. Why else? From a scientific standpoint. Philosophically, you're absolutely right. From a scientific perspective, I'm not a scientist. So how much عاوز FT?
Because the universe is expanding.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
If it is expanding for infinity,
It would have exactly.
expanded for
Exactly. There is a law called the second law of thermodynamics. What's your name again? Forgive me. Yes. Amira, did you heard of that law? Okay, because you smiled when I said it. So you heard. So what does, I can't begin to explain what it is. But basically what it says is, Abuna mentioned, the universe is expanding. Anybody can explain it in 30 seconds? Any scientists?
like there's like the energy law. I'm not sure if
لا,
it's
it's not the
correct.
energy law. It has to do with heat.
Anyways, I took thermodynamics before. I don't remember.
Okay, you forgot it.
Anyways,
ماشي.
but even like they say, like matter cannot exist from nothing. Like this is a law.
Yeah, but I think this law says, no, this is probably the first law of thermodynamics. The second law of thermodynamics says that, as Abuna said, the universe is expanding and it will reach a point of entropy. Well, it will become where it will become desolate or inhospitable to human life. It will be dark and desolate, and the universe will not be. It will move from order to disorder. That's, I think, what the second law of thermodynamics. I think what the second law, مش كده? Everything moves towards entropy. So if the universe is eternal, it would have reached entropy by now, but it didn't, which means that it had a point. But these are just some non-scientific words, or مش non-scientific, some discussions. في بقى ample evidence from the scientific community that the universe had a beginning in time. Who actually made this announcements or declaration? Someone who died recently from England. The theory of everything. Stephen Hawking. He actually made this announcement, and he wrote a book called Brief History of Time, I think it was the book. And he gave a lecture on the origin of the universe, and he said the universe had a beginning. Oh, here it is. Can you read it, Max, for me, please?
The conclusion of this lecture is that the universe has not existed forever. Rather, the universe and time itself had a beginning in the Big Bang. A point of creation would be a place where science broke down.
Listen to this, بقى.
One would have to appeal to religion and the hand of God.
Now listen, if you listen to this lecture on YouTube, this was in his 70th anniversary in Oxford. All the people who attended were mostly atheists. Once he said that last statement, everybody was, oh my God, Dawkins, what are you doing? يعني خليت راسنا زي السمسمة زي ما بيقولوا. Because you're talking about God, فاهم قصدي? But because of his, again, he didn't hold this position for long, unfortunately.
Most of those people spend their whole life trying to disprove
Prove that God.
Then by the end, they're like, I give up. God does exist.
Very well said.
That's
انت عارفة بقى?
They're like, the white flag goes up.
I have 7 examples to share with you later. Those who have spent, just like you said, forgive me, I forget your name again. Susan beautifully said, they spent all their life trying to deny and disprove the existence of God, and in the moment of truth, امتى بقى? On their deathbed.
They're like, okay, God.
And no, أنا هجيب لك excerpts from what they said on their deathbed. Nietzsche, Sigmund Freud, all those, and Bertrand Russell, John Paul Sartre, all of them, all those big atheist names, and what they said on their deathbed. عارفة, you know what? That's very important to mention also. For those who say, you know what? Why bother? I'm happy. Don't shove your God down my throat. I don't believe in God. I'm an atheist. I'm happy. I go to work fine. I have a family. I have a dog, and I'm doing just fine. I don't want your God, but that's only lip service. Deep down, they can't fill that void that they're struggling with. Anyways, let's move on. Oh my goodness. Okay. القعدة معاكم حلوة. Okay. If the universe did not come from nothing, it's not self-created, it is not eternal, then it must be created. احنا قلنا created by Jesus Christ. احنا بنقول بس created. It could be created by a force, by energy, by aliens, حاجات كتيرة. But we need to go, I have to have this methodical thinking, step by step, consequential or sequential thinking. Chronological برضه تمشي. Very good. حلو خالص. Okay, let's move. And second question, and then that will lead us to the conclusion, and we'll take a break. Second question, where did I come from? So cosmologically, where did the universe come from? Biologically, where did life come from? Another question. Here, but I'll tell you a story. A story is always a good break. This is a true story. I was at a college campus talking about the existence of God, and then some college kids came up at the end, and they said, we don't believe in this God you're talking about. And they said all kind of choice words. And I said, okay, well, نقعد واحدة واحدة كده على رواقة. Let me ask you three questions. Three questions. And I would like to get three answers from you. Number one question, where did the universe come from? They said, well, cosmologists, not cosmetologists, but cosmologists are working diligently to find out the answer to this question, and eventually we will come to an answer to that question. So, ماشي. Where did life come from? They said, well, you know what, in Oxford, which is true, in Oxford University right now, there's a symposium of the origin of life. They're trying to come up with reasons and explanations to where life came from, but they haven't yet. But all those biologists are working very hard to come up with an answer to that question. Eventually, we'll come up with an answer to that question. ماشي. Where did your brain, they don't like the word mind. Atheists don't like the word mind. They like the word brain because everything is material. Where did your brain, who came up with these two answers, come from? Brain and answers and deductions and induction, all that. Well, philosophers are trying to explain how the brain works and all of that, and eventually they'll come up. This is a true story. And they were very intellectual atheists as well, or non-believers. So I looked at all three of them, and I said, do you know, my friends, it seems to me that you live by faith. And there was pin drop silence, because the word faith is a bad word for atheists. But I said, you know what? You do live by faith. You don't know where life came from, but you have faith that you'll have an answer one day. You don't know where the universe came from, but you have faith that it will come from some kind of source another day. I also live by faith, but I have evidence that supports my faith. Would you like to discuss? And of course, all of them ran away. But if you think about it, atheists have more faith than believers. I don't know if you've heard of the book by Frank Turek and Norman Geisler, famous apologists, that says, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. It's an actually, we can add that to the list. I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. Look it up, Max, you'll like it. That's actually, it's a great book. Oh, I love it. Note taker, I love it. Thank you. So my question to you, my friends, did I just happen, or am I designed? Am I an accident, or am I wanted? I don't know if you've read the book, The Purpose-Driven Life. No? Okay. So here are add that to the list as well, The Purpose-Driven Life by Rick Warren. You guys need to read. You need to read. Nourish your minds. Okay, let's see what atheists said about where life came from and what life is. ماشي؟ نشوفهم بيقولوا ايه. Richard Dawkins قال, you and I came from a happy chemical accident. You and I came from a happy chemical accident. That's what Richard Dawkins says. Andy Knoll is another Harvard biologist. He said, we don't know how life started on this planet. We don't know exactly when it started. We don't know under what circumstances. We don't know. We don't care. Life موجودة وخلاص. And then Stephen Jay Gould, he's also an evolutionist. He said, that's interesting. We are here because one odd group of fish had a peculiar fin anatomy that could transform into legs for terrestrial creatures. يعني احنا كلنا أصلنا إيه؟ Fish. And these are very reputable, يعني those are ناس محترمة atheists that are.
Guys, don't laugh about this because it's honestly like this is what this is what is taught. This is what you learn. Like it sounds funny right now, but this is honestly like this is what you learn in the classroom when you take evolutionary biology. They tell you these molecules, this is the gas, this is how we now have life on Earth.
Very good.
And so
Thank you. Thank you. So that there's some credence, I mean not credence, there's some validity to these statements because they are being taught in our schools. My son, who is 14 years old, he comes home with telling me that, yeah, we came from happy chemical accidents or from fish or, of course, monkeys and all of these things. But that's what our kids are being taught. Now, that parents need to be made aware of these things. Here's what Sir Fred Hoyle, who's an who is a most noted English astronomer, said. Biochemical systems are exceedingly complex, so much so that the chance of being formed through random shuffling is insensibly different from zero. There must be, he's an atheist, Okay? There must be an intelligence which designed the biochemicals and gave rise to the origin of life. Anthony Flew, who's also an atheist, said the exact same thing. George Wald, who's also an atheist, said something very similar. This is short, I'll say it to you. Since life cannot come from non-life, the only logical conclusion is that life was created supernaturally. All these are atheists. I have 20 more excerpts. I'm not going to bore you with them. But all these are non-believers who came to the conclusion that there must be a creator of life who is supernatural to life, simply because they were honest in their scientific studies. They followed their scientific conclusion where it led them, rather than having a presupposed assumption and trying to find conclusions to support that presupposition they have. Do you see? Yes, Susan?
You know, one time Abuna gave a talk about evolution. It was really good, and the one example he used was, I think, kind of sums it up. He said if you were to find an iPhone, if you're walking on the beach and you find an iPhone like in the sand,
Excellent.
take out the iPhone and
Yes.
you're not going to be like, oh, the sand created the iPhone. The sand
Came by chance.
The sand isn't capable of creating something so magnificent. The universe isn't capable of creating the amazing mind and body.
Exactly.
And minds and whatever.
Exactly.
Or the human existence. I mean, just so I love that example because you know you're going to wonder who created this amazing iPhone. Well, it wasn't the sand. We have to figure out somebody or something big.
Some intelligence, as Anthony or as Fred Hoyle said, some intelligence behind all this creation. Excellent example.
That's a bonus, not mine.
No, it's
Abuna gets the credit.
excellent example. The law of biogenesis by Louis Pasteur, who created or developed the pasteurization of milk. Louis Pasteur said life can only come from life. ما فيش نقاش, no discussion. Non-life cannot come from, life cannot come from non-life. Okay? You have to have life to get. طيب, Christians, what do Christians believe? And I added this slide عشان احنا في الكنيسة. What do we believe? That God is not just a living God. Yes, He's a life-giving God. And there's a big difference between living and life-giving. أبونا في الاعتراف, in the confession, at the very end of the liturgy, he holds the body and he says, Amin, 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 I believe that this is the what body? The living body? The life-giving body. Not الجسد الحي, الجسد المحيي. And there's a difference between حي and محيي. And can someone get the scriptures, the Bible, to 1 Corinthians 15, chapter 15, verse 45. Chapter 15, verse 45. 1 Corinthians 15, 45. And if someone can read it for us. Can you read it for us, Max? So it is written.
Yep. Sorry. And so it is written, the first man, Adam, became a living being. The last Adam became a life-giving spirit.
Perfect. Do you see the difference now? The first Adam was a living being, but the second Adam, who is Christ, was a living being, a life-giving spirit. So we believe in a God who's not just living, but life-giving. He imparts, he possesses the properties of life for him to impart this life unto others. Okay? And these are the verses, and I'm not going to mention them all, but Christ, life in himself. I am the resurrection and the life, he said that to Martha. I am the way, the truth, and the life, he said that to Thomas. I am life, I am life, I am life, I have life. So we believe as Christians that life came from God. طيب. Answering objections. One objection. You say God created everything. حلو خالص. Well, then who then created God? That should be a quick. I have, I think, 4 pages in the book on who created God.
If he's God, nobody will create. He's God.
I mean,
But that's your definition of God.
we can't put human characteristics
أيوة.
on God, because he's not a human, so we can't put.
He's not human, and human are subject to what? 2 dimensions.
Place and time.
Exactly. Space and time. Energy must be all powerful. The first cause of complexity must be all-knowing or omniscient. The first cause of moral values that we have in the effects must be all good. The first cause of human integrity must be truthful. The first cause of human love must be loving. And finally, the first cause of life must be life-giving. You take infinite, eternal, omnipotent, omniscient, good, truthful, loving, life-giving, you end up with Jesus Christ. Do you get it? Did I use the scriptures at all to prove that point? Absolutely not. But these are the attributes of the Lord Jesus Christ. If you listen to the Gregorian liturgy from Abuna, هتلاقي ان هم بيقولوا نفس الاتريبيوتس دي. غير المفحوص، غير المحور، غير كل الحاجات دي. Okay? الأبدي، غير الزمني. So all of these are the attributes that look very similar to the God Christians worship, who is Jesus Christ. I didn't, like I said, use the scriptures to prove that, but I used the scriptures to affirm what the law of causality proved. And these are verses from the scriptures. So let me pause now, because معلش أنا طولت عليكم. But any questions, and I was hoping to have some Q&A. We didn't have Q&A. But we can have it, God willing, next time we meet. Any questions on what we said so far? The two questions. Where did the universe come from? And where did life come from? Do you guys suffer from information overload? Because I do.
So before they made the law of causality, like
قانون السببية.
anyways, like before that, like the faith in Christianity, how did they prove that? Like how did they prove all of this without this law?
احنا قلنا مش هنقول كلمة prove.
Like
احنا
how
نقول
did they have that evidence?
Yeah. The evidence is actually, if you read here, let me give you the evidence way back then. You read Romans chapter, مين يقول لي? Chapter 1. Romans chapter 1. Here. في beautiful verse that says here, Romans 1, 19, 20. Because what may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has shown it to them. Listen to what he says in verse 20. For since the creation of the world, من أول بدء الخليقة, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, both understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without an excuse. Verse 20. So St. Paul said, حتى في المزمور, I think I forget the psalm, الفirmament بتحدث حاجة بالضبط كده. You see, so the universe gives glory to God by the fact that it was created. So you look at these, زي الexample اللي أبونا قال, اللي سوزان قالته اللي هو بتاع الايفون وكده. When you look at the mountains, when you look at the skies, the sunset, and the universe, the creation, you see the fingerprint of the Creator, because it points to the Creator. A 4-year-old will get that concept. So the default position is that there must be a Creator God, not atheism. Atheism is not the default position. فاهم قصدي؟ يعني مش هي دي اللي بتبتدي بيها. احنا بنبتدي بالtheism, and atheism is a departure from the default position. فاهمين قصدي؟
He created the eyes to recognize it and see, like it's all.
Sure, you can get into the brain, the eyes, yani, and that's why you'll see in the field, in different fields. You see in the field of medicine, you'll find that atheists are in less, quantities of atheists are less than the field of, let's say, sociology or philosophy. فاهم قصدي? Because when you actually study medicine, there's no way you can deny the existence of a creator and a creator God. So this is what St. Paul said in Romans chapter 1 and Psalm 19. So that's the evidence for you. Any other comments or questions? Abuna, please add if you want to add anything to this. I think so. If you want to...
Still, it's 2 p.m. for us here, not 3 p.m.
Oh, it's actually 1:20 my time. So I want to open it for you guys for any comments.
Yes, please, if we're going to have some question and answer.
Yeah, I want to have some, forgive me, and I intended to make this a discussion, but I talk too much. I want to hear you guys. Yes, sir.
So what do you
What's
say
your name
if some-
first?
oh,
What's your name?
Rafat.
Rafat.
Yeah.
Hi, Rafa.
What do you say if somebody goes up to you and brings up the evolution aspect, like we came from monkeys or whatever they say?
Although that's your perspective, not mine. You came from monkeys, I didn't. That's a good question. I hate the subject of evolution because I cannot contain it in a 30-second answer. You can say that evolution, the evolution that he refers to is Darwinian evolution, is also known as macroevolution, evolution across types. You can say that there are a lot of problems with that theory that we came from across types. First and foremost, it cannot be proven to be true. These are only, I don't say theories, nazariyat, but they're not proven conclusively truthful facts. Because, simple reason, for you to prove that this is true, you have to have lived at least 1,000,000 years to see that transition. Fahim qasdi? But who lived 1,000,000 years? Also, evolution across type is very difficult to understand and comprehend for another reason. If intelligence faces genetic limitation, how can non-intelligence exceed them? Let me explain. If intelligence, meaning us, if we want to breed, we can breed within the same type. We get a dog, a Shih Tzu, and a Golden Retriever, and then we can make them mate and have a breed within the same species, dogs. But can intelligence, us, exceed the genetic limitation of breeding? Can we, in other words, can you get a crocodile and a dog and have them mate? No. You can't go beyond the genetic limitation of the same species. Intelligence cannot do that. How can randomness and non-intelligence exceed what intelligence cannot exceed? فهمت قصدي? Do you guys get it? Randomness اللي هي ايه؟ عشوائية. Oh, well, all came from, and then they say, well, but hold on. We have same genetic codes, DNAs, and they can go to that route as well. What would be your response to that? Genetic similarities across types do not automatically prove that there is a common ancestor, but they may prove that there's a common creator. فهمت قصدي? Not a common ancestor. So, and there's a lot of other examples. Somebody raised his hand? Yes.
I was going to say that, so your argument of that intelligence versus non-intelligence, but that's the argument of Darwinian evolution, that non-intelligence was able to create this.
Well, the assumption here is that someone who says we came from monkeys, the assumption is that you ascribe to Darwinian evolution, and you have to make sure that's clear, or else you're doing a straw man response. You have to say, so do you believe that we all came from a common ancestor? That's Darwin. So once you establish that, then you can begin addressing that point, or else you're talking, apples and oranges.
Sure.
Yeah. So we have to establish that first.
Yeah, you can answer and say, I do believe in microevolution.
Yes.
Macro. So micro is, yeah, we do change over time because just the nature.
Adaptation.
Of the adaptation.
So the word with micro is we adapt.
But we were created. By,
Can I just tell you very briefly, and I think I didn't want to spend too much time on, I did have a chapter on the book on evolution, but I just want to let's rise above the micro, macro, monkeys, Darwin, and all of that. Listen, I mean, if you study evolution, if you study this subject at the time of Darwin, and Richard Dawkins said it perfectly. He said Darwin made it for us atheists more, he allowed for us to be more intellectual. In other words, a study that Darwin made, he was Christian, by the way. Did you know that? He wanted to denounce God because his sister died of cancer or something like that. Do you guys know the story of Darwin? Anyways, he was a Christian. And the atheistic community latched on to what Darwin said, just like Lawrence Krauss when he said the universe came from nothing. It's أي حاجة they want to just hold on to as a justification for their atheism. But that doesn't prove evolution. It proves that they are still searching for any answer to explain the origin of species. So, يعني ما جاتش على evolution. Some people say, which and we had a discussion with that with several bishops about the concept of theistic evolution. Any of you heard of that? Theistic evolution, and God created the universe. He does exist. He did create the universe using the process of evolution. That until today, I don't think it's something that the Coptic Orthodox Church ascribes to. So that's why I don't want to mention that. ان هو العارف اللي عاوز يمسك العصايه بالنص يبسط الايفولوشنست ويبسط الثيستس ويقول الاثنين مع بعض. Anyways, yes sir.
In response to your question, a very, very basic understanding of evolution is that randomly through this hot sludge that we had in the earth 250 million years ago, then some amino acids were created. And those amino acids attached to each other and folded into proteins. Those proteins attached to each other made a cell, and then eventually that kept happening randomly to where you were created. Now, if you think of the number of amino acids in your body and complex foldings of these proteins and blah, 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 to make a cell that makes a million cells that make up you, the comparison of that happening randomly by chance is if there's two examples that I've heard, is if a tornado went through a junkyard and it created a car. So randomly, all the metal and stuff flew in the tornado, and the screws fell in the right spot to where a car was created afterwards. That's one example. Or if you were to have a billion monkeys pounding on a typewriter, random letters on the typewriter, most of them are going to type out gibberish. One, eventually, if you had them doing this for eternity, one would eventually create the entire books of Shakespeare or something like that.
Hamlet.
Or Hamlet, or whatever, yeah. So those are the two examples that...
Right.
So you think about this random process creating a non-random thing and comparing that to a monkey just pounding on a typewriter. Yes, it's possible that a monkey could randomly push the letters in the right sequence to make a book, but the likelihood of it happening is so outside the realm of possibility that most people say that that would never happen.
Yes.
And the same comparison is made towards macroevolution of these proteins just randomly folding to make an enzyme that works in your body. It's just so outside of what could happen that most people find it to be impossible.
Excellent. Well said. And if you want to speak to the heart, we're speaking to the mind now. Let's speak to the heart for a moment and ask a simple question. Now we're not doing science. Here's my question to the heart. Which one would you rather be? Blindly evolved or lovingly created? And I'll just leave it at that. Which one will give you meaning, fulfillment, satisfaction? To be blindly evolved, randomly blindly evolved, or meaningfully, lovingly created? That's now speaking to the heart. مفيش proofs or evidence. دي either you get it or you don't get it. فاهمين قصدي؟
And which ancestor do you like to be your origin? Is it the monkey or God?
بالظبط كده. ما عشان كده قلت له if you say that's your God, not that's your origin. I want to share with you something here Herbert Spencer said. In 1903, Herbert Spencer made a profound scientific statement. He's a disciple of Charles Darwin. You know what he said? Everything in the universe, this is called the quintessence, everything in the universe can be explained by 5 basic principles: space, matter, time, force, and action. Sometimes energy or action.